What does this little Matchbox car have to do with our brand new Model Y? And why is it not only far faster to build, but far better to drive? Let's take a look.
Here we are in front of the Tesla Model Y. This is the Austin version. You can notice the gigacasting here, so it's only one big piece of gigacasting. Is a U-shaped, so the operator can go inside, start assembling the vehicle from the inside and go toward the exterior.
So as you can see in that initial clip from Autoline, and of course I will leave a link to that in the description, you should definitely check out the full video. The full video, by the way, is just over 10 minutes long, and Han Minh Ly, who is the person on camera, and one assistant basically put the entire front and back of the car together in 10 minutes. It's absolutely crazy to watch. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to show you a few clips from that. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but I highly recommend watching it. It is incredible to watch how fast this thing goes together and basically how a single person can do it. So let's get back to this little Matchbox Model Y and what it has to do with what I just showed you, that initial clip. And that is this, by the way, this is red. This is something that my wife got me at Dollar Tree, I believe, for like $1. So you never know what you'll find at Dollar Tree. We also got a cool little Rivian R1T here as well. So these guys will go up in the back. Geez, I can't get a good shot of it. There we go. These guys will go up in the back there as soon as I get done. But for today, they are props. Anyway, these cars are the inspiration for Elon Musk to create the gigacasting. I believe it's supposed to be pronounced gigacasting, not gigacasting, but of course there was gigawatt from Back to the Future, so maybe it is pronounced that way. I don't know. I'm not going to take a side on that one. I will say gigacasting and we'll just let it go. Anyway, Elon was playing with this, and you can read this in Walter Isaacson's biography and of course some other places as well. But he was looking at this. Nowadays, sadly, the bottom part is actually injection molded plastic, but the top part of the vehicle is metal still, and that is die cast. The bottom used to be die cast as well. And if I had one of the old school Hot Wheels, it always said die cast on the bottom. And I remember that from a kid because I was like, ooh, die cast, what does that mean? Well, basically what it means is that you take the metal part of this, you create a mold, a little tiny mold, and you inject a metal into that, some sort of aluminum or something like that. You inject it into that mold that is pressed, you let it cool down for a short period of time, then you open up the press, the thing drops out, or you pick it out, or whatever that thing is. You then have the basic shape of this, and of course then you injection mold the plastic in a similar fashion to that. These are attached together with 2 screws, and then you put the rest of the stuff on. So very, very simple, but Elon Musk always talks about toys and how important toys are to thinking about how to build things. Because if you consider this, I mean, we got this car for $1. I'm sure originally before it made it to the Dollar Tree, it was probably more like $4 or $5, but it's a very, very inexpensive item. And so in order to make money with this, you number one have to manufacture it very, very cheaply. You have to make these guys for a few cents, you know, maybe 30 or 40 cents or something. They have to be very cheap, and you also have to be able to make them at incredible quantities. So you have to be able to make millions of these die-cast vehicles. And so what you want to do is create something as rapid as possible that creates a shape that is locked in. Both of these shapes, whether it's plastic or aluminum, these shapes are you know, they're never going to change. The molds are the same. And so you will always know that you will have these tolerances where you can put everything together and it's all going to be, you know, perfectly aligned. You can very rapidly put the entire vehicle together and spit it out so that you can make it as cheaply as possible, because the longer it takes to make the vehicle, the more expensive it gets. More on that in a minute, but first, it's getting on towards fall in the Northern Hemisphere. The weather's getting awesome and a little bit chilly, and also we have things like pumpkin spice latte and cakes and pies and the holiday season coming up. And while that's all something to look forward to, it's not the greatest thing for your body. The shorter days, the colder weather, the bad food that you tend to eat, all of that makes you feel a lot less healthy than you do in the summer. But what, you might ask, can you do to help out this situation? What you can do is do like me and start drinking AG1. This is packed with 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, prebiotics, probiotics, adaptogens. It's amazing foundational nutrition to help you feel better as the cold weather and holidays approach. And you know what? It tastes fantastic too, sweet with a hint of pineapple. Oh man, that's good. And it has no added sugar, which is fantastic in this season of the year when sugar seems to be everywhere. I can tell you for a fact that since starting to take AG1, I have much more consistent energy. I don't have those roller coaster highs and lows of energy. I have more focus, I can get more done, and I'm also better able to resist some of those junk food temptations that are especially prevalent this time of year. And if you click my link in the description, you get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamins D3 and K2. So what are you waiting for? If you want to feel your best during this holiday season, take my advice and start taking AG1 today. A big thank you to AG1 for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get back to it. What does Elon call that again? Like the idiot factor or something like that, where he says, you know, what is the cost of the raw materials of this? That's a few cents or something. So anything beyond the raw materials is like the idiot factor. So if it costs you $2 to make it, you have spent almost the entirety of that, maybe a couple of cents of raw materials and like $1.98 or something like that building it. That's all unnecessary costs, according to Elon. He's like, how low can you get that? How close can you get that to the raw materials? If you can build this for 10 cents, then your idiot factor is only like 8 cents or something. So obviously you want to reduce it and get it as close to the raw material costs as possible. So of course, famously, these vehicles were the inspiration for the Gigapress, and Elon went to, I believe there was 5 companies that make large die-cast presses. You know, this is much, much simpler. This is tiny, right? So it's really easy to inject some sort of molten aluminum, press it, and have it come out and be perfect. It's, you know, there's not a lot of space to fill. The physics of this are relatively easy, and it's a well understood problem. When you get to the gigapresses that Tesla is using for their Model 3s and their Model Ys, and we won't even talk about the Cybertruck right now because that's even bigger, but they're like the size of a house. They're like what I'm, you know, living in right now. These things are like, you know, something along these lines, right? They're not that much bigger than the vehicle itself. So they probably would fit on a tabletop. I don't know for a fact, but they're not that big unless, of course, they have a whole bunch of those dies and they cast it all at once so they can make like 10 or 20 or something. So then they would be bigger. But anyway, we're talking about a relatively small thing versus something the size of the house. Anyway, 4 out of the 5 companies they went to said no. Idra, based in Italy, said maybe. And Tesla was like, maybe's a good answer. So they went with that. And they worked with Idra very, very hard over several years to not only create the casting machines with the amount of force and pressure and speed to be able to do this, but also had their own in-house material scientists at Tesla and SpaceX as well, by the way, which is the nice synergy you get. They invented a new type of aluminum that could be injected over a very large space. I mean, these gigacastings are big, right? That's the size of the front of a car or the back of a car. And potentially when we get to the Model 2, whatever the next gen vehicle is, that could be smaller. We could be looking at one single die cast piece that will be the front and back and some sort of rails or something to mount the structural battery pack on. So that will be absolutely massive. It's the size of a car. Right now, it's about 1/3 the size of a car. Still absolutely huge. It takes something the size of a house to make something the size of a car. Nobody thought it was possible. Sandy Munro being possibly the only exception. He had been pushing die casting for a very long time. But anyway, the industry was like, heck no, you have to make, you know, 500,000 plus vehicles in order to make it make economic sense. So Tesla was like, yeah, we can do that with the Model 3 and the Model Y. It's going to be popular enough that we'll make over 500,000 of these vehicles, and therefore the economics work in our favor. And so they, you know, they worked with Idra for several years. They came up with the new material. They came up with the die casting machine. They came up with the Gigapress and the materials and everything. And they started with the back part of the Model Y, the rear, which is our 2021 Model Y, the white one that we're selling as of tomorrow. That has a rear gigacasting. They then went with a front gigacasting as well, and also they've done the Model 3, I believe, has a rear gigacasting but not a front gigacasting. What does that give you? Number one, it reduces a huge part of the line. The other option is to do stamping and welding and all of that kind of stuff. And so when you see those videos of like the robots going, you know, with all the sparks flying and all that kind of stuff, they're building the part that this gigacasting does in one piece. So it's faster, it takes less room. Of course, that means everything is less expensive in that case. And also you have incredibly tight tolerances. When you put things together and weld them, even if you're doing it robotically and everything, the pieces tend to shift. There's a little bit of warping and all of that. And as that happens, that means that when you're building the vehicle itself, you have to kind of, there's famous stories, even with Tesla back in the early days with the Model S and the Roadster and stuff, you take a 2x4, you put it on this thing so it doesn't scratch it, and then you start hitting it with a sledgehammer to like warp the pieces back into shape. All of that takes time. It takes a lot of labor. It's not automatic. It's not easy. So Tesla has been working and working and working to make this easy. So the GigaPress part, and you could see Han like inside of it, he says it's U-shaped. So what you get is something that the operator can stand right inside, and eventually Optimus can stand right inside as well. Super, super easy. You don't have to bend over. You don't have to get in awkward positions. Everything kind of drops into place. You don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff that goes along with traditional manufacturing. And a big part of that is because the gigacasting allows you to create this piece without crossbars and stuff like that you would have to normally build into it in order to keep it stable while you were building the rest of the car. And by the way, as far as I understand it, at least, Franz von Holzhausen, who is the designer, lead designer at Tesla, he doesn't just design the outside of the vehicle, he also designs the process of making it. So he is responsible for how do you build this car in an incredibly efficient manner? How do you build the factory line so that you can build this car in that efficient manner? Probably help to figure out how to create the proper shape for the gigacasting as well, because it's a complex shape. I mean, it's like a U shape with all these little things that's sticking out and all these rails and stuff to mount things on. So it's very complex. So if you think he just like sketches out a design for the vehicle and he's like, oh, cool, it looks like that, I'm done, and he goes home and has, Mai Tai, something like that. No, most of his job is actually building the process that builds the car. So the design and everything is super cool. But in my mind, the even cooler part, even though it's kind of an unsung hero sort of thing, is how do you build this thing incredibly efficiently and make it exactly the same every time, make the tolerances super tight. If you haven't seen my video, my first impression video, I'll leave a link to that up here and at the end of this video. I specifically call out how much stiffer this car feels than the 2020 version. And the 2020 version had the rear gigacasting, but it did not have the front. And so there's just a little bit of looseness and, wiggle and everything that happens in that vehicle that is absolutely not there. The other one now, it really feels like you're absolutely on rails driving this thing. There's absolutely no give in the structure of the car. It's amazing. And I've got it in sport mode, so I get to feel that. And maybe some people would like the old school, like 1970s bouncy Cadillac sort of feel where it's just got this massive suspension and everything sort of wiggling around and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm, I like a car that just feels solid. If you think like a BMW or a Mercedes is a well-built car, you're going to think these new Model Ys are exceptionally well-built cars. I mean, everything just feels so tight and it's all together. And I'm sure I haven't had a chance to look at the Project Highland Model 3 yet, but I have a feeling that that is going to feel even more luxurious and tightly put together. All right, so with that long preamble out of the way, let's watch Han put this thing together and look how easy it is.
The cooling beam.
So this is the one rather heavy part. This is the cooling beam, and note how everything is built onto this. So you can build it offsite, right? You can have another group of people who are building this, and you have a beam, and you have the heat pump, and you have the octo valve, and all of that kind of stuff is on this beam, and it's all connected together. And again, it's rigid, and it just drops into place on the gigacasting.
Can I help you? Yes. You have the cooling beam, so
So you can see there just how easy that is to put in. It took two people, but they're in an awkward environment. They're in some sort of car show environment. So obviously you would be able to do this more quickly in a factory. You might also have a lift assist or something so one person can do it. That's just a hook that would stick on it so you can pick it up. So it's quite possible that one person with a lift assist could do this, but notice that there's no way to get this wrong. You stick it into place, there's a spot that it sits on the gigacasting, and then you drop the bolts in. So it's just that easy to put the thing together.
So the cooling beam is a beam with all the elements, components for the cooling system, except the radiator. So you have the accumulator, condenser, compressor, octavalve here. So this is a complete cooling system, and is compressed in all this beam. This beam is common on the different models of Tesla.
Okay, I want to call that out really quickly as well. He says this is common on all Teslas with very minor modifications. So what that means is that you can build these for the Model Y, the Model 3, the Model S, the Model X. You build that part. So the people who are building that part don't have to build a bunch of different versions of it. They just build one.
And one thing that you pointed out is all the bolts go in from the top down.
And again, just breaking in here, notice all the bolts go in from the top down. So notice that they are standing. Watch how many times they actually have to crouch. So they did have to crouch to pick up the part, but again, with a lift assist, you could probably do that without as much effort. But anyway, you've got something where you put this into place, you take a bolt, you have a power tool, of course, you go, and it's already attached. No bending over, no awkwardness. It's all coming in from the top.
All the bolts here in this area from the top down are vertical, so it's easy for the operator to put the bolts.
And do you think that this could be done by robots in the future?
Maybe.
So notice that little smile from Han. He's saying, maybe. I think, we're looking. This is a job that Optimus could do. Honestly, this is a job that even a standard factory robot could probably do with a little bit of retooling and stuff. It's a very, very straightforward process at this point. Nothing complicated, no bending into awkward positions. Certainly a robot like Optimus could do this because it could just walk in here. And remember, this is part of Tesla's unboxed process. They won't officially do this till the Model 2, but it's something that you can tell that they're working on already. They're building this in segments. They're making it easy to build with fewer people, fewer robots, fewer processes, all of that kind of stuff.
Here we can have Poka-yoke for the AC connections, so you cannot reverse the part, so it's always in the correct position. And for 5 pipes, you only have 2 fasteners.
So there's a very technical term for you, the poka-yoke. It just means basically that you can't connect the wrong thing to the wrong part. So I can't see the front of this, but I assume they have somewhat different connectors. And also, obviously, you would have to cross the pipes and everything in order to make them fit the wrong way. So they're designed to be very, very straightforward. As soon as you walk in, you know how to attach them. Even I would know how to attach them without ever having been trained or anything like that. It would just be obvious how that works. And also, we've got 5 pipes and only 2 attachments, so you're reducing the amount of attachments by 3. If you think about it, there could be 5. Number 1, that's more complex and you could easily get one in the wrong order, but also you'd have to attach 5 of these things. So in this case, you only have to attach 2, which is great. If I had to take a guess, one of these attachments is the outbound and the other is the inbound. So you get cool water and hot water, things like that. Liquid, fluid, whatever's inside there. But anyway, the coolant would be cool on the one end and hot on the other, which is why you can't just have one single attachment.
So then we have the air filter here. So the filter is 2 parts, but again, you no need fastener to put these 2 parts.
They just snap together.
You just snap together.
So again, note this, you've got 2 plastic parts, they're relatively large. Do they have any connectors? No, you just take the things, you go whack, you put them together, and then you can stick them in the car.
And if you notice, this part will lay on the cooling beam, so it will never fall down.
And again, just amazing. Think about that design. You've got this sitting directly on top of the cooling beam, so it's supported and it's a plastic piece. So you don't want it taking weight and potentially, somebody gets inside and they lean on the front or they do something weird or something like that and they're putting pressure on it. That plastic part could potentially give, but because it's sitting on that, solid piece of steel inside there, it's never going to go anywhere. It's completely supported.
So again, the front frame, you just put it on its side, so you have a C-shaped part here that can keep and hold the front frame.
So this front frame, which supports the bumper and all of that kind of stuff. Again, note, you can put this together remotely at another location in the factory, and then you can just have these things. So you pull them off. Again, heavy enough that it requires 2 people. In this case, if you had a lift assist, I'm sure you could do it with 1 easily enough. It fits into one place. There's again 4 bolts. The 4 bolts go in from the top. You just go zoop, 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 and you're done putting in the whole front frame unit.
And just to notice, The radiator is horizontal, it's not vertical.
And really quick note here how we have the radiator actually attached to the entire front frame. So if you're familiar with an ICE car, with a gas car, you know the radiator sits in the front. It's vertical, and it's got all those little fins and things like that to cool the very, very hot engine, and that's the thing that all that airflow goes into. Reduces the dynamic capability of internal combustion engine vehicles because you're forcing air through the front to cool the engine. Well, here you've got a horizontal radiator instead of a vertical one, and you may think, well, that's going to be terrible. That's not going to work at all to cool the vehicle. Well, electric motors don't have internal combustion, so they don't get nearly as hot. The batteries, of course, get hot as well as they're being utilized, but they don't get as hot, and you can make it work with a horizontal radiator rather than a vertical one. So that's genius. That allows you, A, not to have a grill in the front, so you're forcing air through it, but B, it allows everything to be flatter, and you don't have to have the front of the vehicle doesn't have to stand up as high in order to have that vertical radiator. So you can make the front of the vehicle lower, and you can therefore decrease the amount of aerodynamic drag, which is a brilliant move on Tesla's part.
But we know that we don't reach exactly the same temperature of thermal vehicles. Here we are around maximum at 70 degrees. So this is enough. And also there is an aerodynamic effect that because the air come here and go up on the windshield.
So first of all, max temperature is only 70 degrees centigrade, of course, so that's hotter than that in Fahrenheit. I don't know, 150, 160, something like that Fahrenheit. But anyway, 70 degrees is not very hot compared to how hot a radiator gets with internal combustion engine vehicles. And then note that what Tesla is doing is they're actually using a scoop. So they're actually scooping in a little bit of air. So you see the main front part of the car, and then there's a little gap there, and that air gets shoved through the radiator, kind of moves down under the car, up through the motor, and then out the windshield, and it gets heated along the way. And so that not only is cooling the radiator with airflow and everything, but it's also moving hot air over the external part of your windshield, which means if you have ice or snow or, even some rain, fog, that kind of stuff on the outside of the windshield, that hot air will actually help to defrost the windshield as well. So that's kind of genius stuff that Tesla is doing here.
Just one part that is very important, the front, because the radiator is horizontal, you have a lot of space here, and is a nice thing to give to the customer extra space for storage.
So look at that. You make the radiator horizontal and you get a gigantic frunk that you can stick in the front of the vehicle. If you had had a vertical radiator, the frunk, if anything, would have just been a really, really narrow little thing. So this is brilliant. And again, also the frunk, I couldn't tell exactly, but I believe that it's sitting on the radiator to some extent. So it has internal support. Obviously, it's supported by the big lip that goes around on the outside as well, but I believe it sits directly on the radiator. It may actually offset just a little bit, so I'm not positive. But anyway, all this stuff fits together so nicely. So that's it. That's pretty much all the internals of the front end of the vehicle. That took like no time at all, 5 minutes basically in the video. And so now we move to the back.
Exactly. You have a gigacasting in the back, U-shaped gigacasting. So again, the operator can start from the inside, going out.
So same thing as the front of the vehicle, you have a U shape so that it's really easy for the operator to stand inside. And again, if you're putting this together with welding and stuff, more than likely you're going to have at least some temporary cross beams or something to keep the shape of the rear of the vehicle. So you can't work this easily because you can't just stand inside it because that part is not rigid enough until you build it all out.
So gigacasting is an expensive part. So they try to use it at the maximum. So they put some reference so you can in fact install the insulation without any fastener. It just
fits right into
place.
So look at that. That's just brilliant, right? Again, the part can be made elsewhere. And then what you do is you just take it and you put it onto the side and you shove it into place and it just stays there. Because number one, the gigacasting is always going to be exactly the same. So you can build these parts with very, very tight tolerances. And number two, all of the other pieces are going to keep it in place as well.
Okay. Again, the same for this part. So you just snap in.
And that right there is those little side pockets that you get. And notice again, no bolts, no fasteners. It's just, you stick it on there, you go clunk, and you just stick it on. And again, this is all enabled because the gigacasting has no play. These parts are identical. Just like these little toy parts, the cars are identical as you churn them out. These gigacastings are identical as you churn them out. So you can build these parts with very, very tight tolerances. You know it will fit inside it, and you know it will fit snugly. So you just put it in, whack it, and it's done.
So the cable is aluminum cable, so is lighter, but the most important thing is that aluminum is much more cheaper than copper. Copper, yeah. Yes.
And they are also shaped
yes.
wires so they fit right into the rear end.
Exactly.
There's no loose wires. It just goes exactly
yes.
where it's supposed to go.
They look for rigidity, so tomorrow, if they need to automatize the operation, it will be easier.
And there you can see from the color, that's electrical. Orange is always like, danger, don't touch this stuff. So that's electrical cable, high voltage electrical cable. And you can see that's actually from the charging port. That's where that is, right? So that would be the thing where you would plug into it. That then goes to the high voltage batteries and everything. But that part is aluminum, and it's shaped exactly because, again, the gigacasting is the same every single time. So you pre-shape it and you can just shove it right in there. You don't have to bend things. You don't have to worry about flexible tubing and things like that. So again, you can use a robot to build this thing out if you needed to, because the part is rigid, and it's easier for a robot to deal with rigid parts.
Another part, so this part, just to close,
Snap fit.
Snap fit.
And there's the rear assembly. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to put the bolts on vertically because it's horizontal. But anyway, it's very easy to see and very easy to mess around with. And you can see how the back end basically doesn't have an awful lot of stuff in it. There's just a lot of space. But again, it's snap fit initially, at least. It looks like you have to screw on some nuts in order to, completely fasten it into place. But the initial fit is snap fit. So you put it on, you just whack it, and everything fits super solidly with no creaking, no moving around or anything like that.
We have the container here, so you just put inside. The shape take care that is aligned, and you put the 4 fastener, and that's all.
And again, the bolts come in from the top, very easy
yes,
to do.
Exactly.
So there's the under trunk. It just has 4 fasteners. Again, it's a drop-in. It's literally like you just drop it into place and it will automatically seat itself because the tabs on the plastic part will align with where the bolts need to go in on the metal part.
So there is also poka-yoke here. You save 1 and 2 fasteners.
So instead of 3 bolts or 4 bolts,
bolts
you're using
you have
3.
3. Yes.
But they poka-yoked it so it only
yes.
goes in the right way.
I cannot reverse it.
No.
Okay, will not fit.
So look at that genius move right there. They not only removed 2 bolts, 1 on each side, they also poka-yoked it because there are 3 bolts that stick out on each side on the rear unit, and there's not one where the part that doesn't have the bolt hole is, and if you try to put it in upside down, they won't line up. So the thing basically can't go in upside down. It has to go in right side up. So again, all of this stuff, Sandy Munro calls it cost of quality. Any mistake you make in the building process, let's say somebody put it in upside down and you caught that at the end of the production thing and you're like, oh, this doesn't fit together right and something's wrong. You have to pull that car off the line and you have to fix it, as a whole separate thing. And that takes a lot of extra time. All of that costs money when you're trying to build 5,000 cars a week at a factory.
Yes, we have the rear fascia. It's very light. You have only one connection here. And if you want, I can also put it on.
And there you go, 1 person. Usually it takes 2 people, 1 on each side to do it.
Holy mackerel, that rear fascia is just incredible, right? He just picked that up all by himself. That's the whole back end of the vehicle. He just picked up 1 connector, snap-on fit, basically. So 1 person can do this, no problem at all. It's not heavy. It's a little bit awkward because it's big, but you have 1 electrical connector and you just snap the back on.
So the tail lights, again, you just fit it. You have 2 fasteners in the back here to keep the tail lights, but most importantly, here, the tail lights is coupled. Oh, let me go this. So, it's coupled with the tail light. So this is the door for the charging port.
Point, right?
Yes. So there is an actuator that's okay.
Yeah. But you were saying too that this little door
Yes.
is black because it blends right in with the tail light.
Yes,
so it does not
exactly.
have to be body color. Everyone can use
Yes,
the same
exactly.
black.
So look at that. It's just amazing how all of the thinking goes into this thing. Number one, obviously he struggled a little bit because he was just messing around and talking and stuff. But normally it would just be like ka-chunk, ka-chunk, you stick it in, it goes to that high voltage connector. Both the rear tail light and the charging port part fit together. They have just a couple of fasteners. And he's talking about how they're not paint colored, they're plastic. So they're black on every single car, which means you don't have to go through the agony of, matching paint colors with all of this. That is brilliant when you think about it, because then that charging port does not have to be colored according to each car. It's the same piece. It doesn't have to go through the paint shop. And remember, when you do that in a paint shop, you have to take every single part that's painted off and paint it at the same time, which means that that charging port would have to be connected to that particular car. In this case, you don't have to worry about it. Notice that you've got, the outside aluminum frame of this body had the paint color, but nothing that we attached was that paint color, except for the rear part of the car, the part that he just put on right before that. That actually has to be the same paint color, but everything else is just parts that you don't have to worry about. All of those color matching problems are just removed by making this part plastic and making it black consistently across all of the vehicles rather than matching paint color.
So they are looking for complexity reduction, modularity, and also reducing the number of parts, the brackets and fasteners, in order for the operator to be faster in the assembly of the car.
So less parts, less complexity, faster assembly, of course, less expensive to build a vehicle in that case. All of those things go together. And then I will add to that from a consumer standpoint, because a lot of people say you can't tell that as a consumer, but I think you can. I think you can feel the fact that there's not squeaking and wiggling and jiggling around and, everything's just rigid. Everything's in place. Everything is solid. The drive feels better. There's no creaks. There's none of that kind of stuff that happens with the vehicle. So even from a consumer standpoint, this is helpful. But of course, also from a consumer standpoint, Tesla can build these cars cheaper than anybody else because there's just so little, it's basically two operators can do this entire process, or one with a lift assist. Basically, he put this whole thing together himself, with a little bit of help from some people helping him to lift a couple of the heavier parts into place. But that's pretty amazing. The back end of it, he didn't even need any help at all. He did the whole thing himself. And all of it was while standing up without having to bend over, except for the rear fascia. There are the 6 nuts you'd have to put on horizontally, but as he says, they're the only horizontal thing in the entire construction. Everything else is built vertically. So this is a masterclass in how to build a car effectively, efficiently, and inexpensively. And for us consumers, we get the bonus of the car driving better and feeling better too. Talk about a win-win. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon patrons, my YouTube channel members, and of course my ex-subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And of course, if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, thanks once again to AG1 for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to check out my link in the description, get your 5 free travel packs, and a year's supply of vitamins D3 and K2. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.